Welcome to Real Mob Stories. This is your host, James Proctor. Hope everyone's doing well. Today, there are a few stories we're covering, and I'm going to answer the question if Jeff Nadu and Scott Burnstein went too far. Scott Burnstein this week put out a list of the top 10 rising stars in the five families of New York, and Jeff Nadu did a video as well about that list. I was asked about my thoughts on them putting out this list, so I'm going to give you my opinion, my philosophy when it comes to talking about active guys in the mob. Today in Gangland News, Jerry Capisi had an interesting article where he talked about Vic Amuso and the comments by Judge Frederick Block on why he didn't grant Vic Amuso's compassionate release. It's actually very interesting and just proves the point in my last video that compassionate release is not just or fair. Finally, I'm going to talk about the death of a Gambino associate that was in John Guy's inner circle and how he's another one that was denied compassionate release, although he was terminally ill. Please hit the like button if you haven't done so already. Please subscribe to Real Mob Stories with James Proctor. Without further delay, on to our feature presentation. Scott Burnstein published a list this week of who he considers the 10 top rising stars in the New York five families. These are guys that he sees as having influence today in the family and are future mob bosses or administration members. We also had Jeff Nadu talk about this list a couple of days ago. I was asked my thoughts on these guys on the list. Did Jeff Nadu and Scott Burnstein go too far by bringing this information out to the public? First of all, Jeff and Scott can do whatever they want with their channels. Both of them have a strong following in the genre, and both of them have a great number of sources they're able to get inside information from. Is all the information accurate that they get? I wouldn't say so, but I would say that's how it is with most sources in this genre. So mobsters give their opinions to Scott and Jeff. I would say for the most part, they get most of the information from former guys in that life and informants. I wouldn't say 100%, but I'd say for the most part. And I'm sure they get information as well from attorneys and law enforcement. Personally, I don't like to talk about active guys unless it's a newsworthy item, such as a criminal case happening. I'll talk about some active guys about things they did years ago in their past that's already common knowledge. Truth is that law enforcement already knows most of the information out there, but I also know that both mob guys and law enforcement watch these shows. Although this list is intriguing that Scott put together, I'm not going to talk about the content of the list and whether or not I think it's accurate or not. If you want to know who's on that list of top rising stars in the mob, please go over to Gangster Report and also the Sit Down with Jeff Nadu. I thought Jeff did a great job with it. And, I've never had any issue with any of my subscribers watching other shows. In fact, I want all of you to watch whatever shows interest you. There are a lot of great content creators out there. And my opinion is that if I do a good job and bring out interesting content, people are going to watch what I put out. But the reason I don't talk about active guys, for the most part, it's more philosophical. First of all, I don't want to spread gossip, and many times the information we get's not totally accurate. I don't have an interest in doing anything to put these guys on the radar. And with that said, I'm sure law enforcement already is aware of all these guys, and there's nothing I could share that would cause them to get jammed up, but I just personally won't talk about those things unless it's something in the news. I did talk about the Joey Merlino situation supposedly being shelved or whatever because it was already out there with many sources. Personally, I can't believe that a Gambino boss would go out to Philly and sit down with alleged mob guys, especially when you see that reporter Scratweiser or whatever he's got this unusual and creepy fascination with the mob where he follows them around and ambushes them with questions. I'm surprised that the meeting that took place wasn't caught on film by Scratweiser. So I'm going to play, just for fun, a couple of the short videos which shows you what this guy did.
Everybody out here was watching these. Guys, they're on everybody's radar.
You might call it the hot corner in South Philadelphia, 18th and Wolf. The guy waving his arms and looking ticked off is Steven Mazzone, the former number 2 man under one-time mob boss Joey Merlino. Mazzone is now reported to be the acting boss in the wake of those recent federal indictments. The 2 guys getting an earful from Mazzone are Anthony Borghese in the white shirt. He's the nephew of jail mob boss Joe Legambi. In the blue shirt is Philip Legambi, the brother of the current mob boss. Just a 9-year sentence on racketeering charges. His lawyer denies any current mob involvement and says Mazzone is working and enjoying being home with his family. But mob sources say Mazzone is Joey Merlino's choice to run the mob right now. As they argued, the trio politely stepped aside for a man in a wheelchair. When a friend from the neighborhood waved from a passing car, they smiled, waved back, and went right back to the conversation.
Okay, that was the first one. Now, the second one is actually interesting to me because it involves John Ciancaglini, and he gets pretty much ambushed by this reporter. So here we go. Here's some footage of the alleged Philly mobster John Ciancaglini, a.k.a. Johnny Chang, being asked questions by journalist Dave Schreckweiser.
John, can I ask you a couple quick questions?
No, sir.
No?
None whatsoever.
You don't want to say anything?
No, sir.
You can't tell me what you're doing here?
No, sir.
Are you working here?
No, sir.
Do you own it?
None of your business.
You don't want to say anything?
No, sir.
All right, can I ask you what Gayton's doing here all the time and Mike
Buying
Lancelotti?
cigarettes. Buying cigarettes.
What about Mike?
No, I got no problem seeing Michael.
And Sonny?
None of your business.
No? You don't want to say anything?
Nope.
Okay.
Nothing to say to you.
Can I ask you why this is in your wife's
What did
name?
I just say? Didn't you just say, could I ask you? I say no.
Mm-hmm.
What's so redundant about that?
I want to give you an opportunity to say something if you want to
I
say
have
it.
no opportunity. Nothing to say to you.
Nothing.
No, sir.
Okay.
You two, you done with that? It's
We're-
ridiculous.
we're done.
These are ridiculous.
Come on.
We're done.
Get out.
We're done.
Get out.
Okay.
So that's Dave Schreckweiser. So that's that, like I said, I'm surprised that he didn't record whatever meeting that supposedly the Gambinos had in Philly with the Philly guys. So anyway, just thought I would play that just for fun. For me, it's just crazy to see the extent where some of these guys will go to get, information from mobsters. But, people can criticize what my former partner and good friend Lee Cole did a year ago when he came up on Sammy Gravano. But to be fair, Sammy did invite Lee Cole. He said anybody that has a problem with him just to come out and say it to him to his face. Anyway, the other reason that I don't really report on, these active guys today is that I really don't find the mob today very interesting. The mob that we have today is just a shell of what it once was. Yeah, we have mobsters and we have some that are making good money, but for the most part, the guys we have are not of the same caliber of what we had in the 70s and 80s, for example. With RICO and cameras everywhere and informants, it's just not a good life to get involved in. And getting made just puts you on the radar, in my opinion. And I'm more interested in the history. That's where my passion lies. And like I said, we're going to be having a Patreon channel very, very soon where our focus is on mob history. And it'll be engaging with all of you having input into the content we put out and actually helping to drive the channel as honorary producers. I'm putting this all together, but we're going to have a lot of content available on day one. And like I said, Scott and Jeff, if they want to put out this type of information, that's up to them. I'm not here to tell them what to do on their channels, and it's obvious that people like their content with the strong numbers they get, but it's just not something I'm going to do over here. Next, I want to talk about Vic Amuso and what was said today in Gangland News. So Jerry Capisi discusses what Judge Frederick Block said, and also talks to a good friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, Matthew Maury, who's an attorney. So the title of the article is Judge Feared He'd Be Called a Blockhead If He Gave Mob Boss Vic Amuso Compassion. So he wrote a book. It's called A Second Chance. And so Judge Block's reflecting on his decision to deny compassionate release to Vic Amuso. If you remember, Amuso was convicted of 9 murders. He spent 33 years in prison. He sought release due to severe health issues under the First Step Act. And think he's like 90 years old now, and he was 88 when it was denied. So despite a compelling legal brief from Amuso's defense team, which the judge agreed that was compelling, Judge Block ultimately rejected the motion, citing concerns about Amuso's potential continued involvement with organized crime and the seriousness of his past crimes. And where they were saying is that back in 2017 that there was the issue with between the Bronx and the Brooklyn factions, and believe that they had decided upon some changes to the administration acting boss, and they said that Vic Amuso in 2017 was involved in those decisions. One of the key revelations in Block's book is his acknowledgement that media pressure may have played a subconscious role in his decision. And Block admits that he was deeply affected by a 2007 New York Daily News article that ridiculed him as Judge Blockhead for his stance on a different high-profile case. And so this earlier experience made him wary of media backlash in Amuso's case, especially given the extensive coverage and public commentary that followed this mobster's release request. So Block confesses that although he had liked to believe his decision was purely based on legal factors, he wonders if the fear of public and media criticism influenced his final ruling. And then Judge Block highlights the strength of Amuso's legal argument. It was emphasizing Amuso's age, his health, his impeccable prison record. And the defense had argued that Amuso should be allowed to die with dignity, surrounded by his family, rather than in a prison hospital. And Block admitted the arguments were thought-provoking and forced him to grapple with difficult questions about justice, rehabilitation, and mercy. However, Block remained unconvinced that Amuso's circumstances met what they call the extraordinary and compelling threshold required for compassionate release. So the two major factors that swayed Block's decision was Amuso's health, which while deteriorating didn't seem severe enough to warrant release, and then concerns about his continued influence over the Casey family, even from behind bars. And Block had reasoned that Amuso's advanced age and lengthy prison term were just natural consequences of his life sentence and not exceptional conditions that merited special consideration. And so despite this decision, Block expressed ongoing uncertainty about whether he made the right choice. He reflected on media articles, books, questioned the practice of keeping elderly, incapacitated criminals in prison, particularly when they no longer pose a threat to society. And so while acknowledging the validity of these arguments, Block concluded that the gravity of Amuso's past actions and the potential risk outweighed the case for his compassionate release. And so Judge Block's decision really underscores what I see as the tension between public sentiment, media influence, and the principles of justice. And so although he denied Amuso's motion, the judge's introspective account, it just raises broader questions. It raises ethical questions, especially around imprisoning aging and ill criminals for life. To me, it just proves what I've been saying about compassionate release and how it's unfair. And finally, I want to discuss the death of Mark Ryder. So Mark Ryder is a convicted drug dealer, former Gambino family associate. He passed away from stomach cancer this week, or earlier this month, after spending 37 years in prison. And Ryder had been serving a life sentence for trafficking heroin and 2 murders from 1982. As I said, he died at a federal prison hospital. He was 76, and this was just weeks after a judge acknowledged his terminal condition and even hinted at releasing him to die surrounded by family. And so in that case, back in 2021, it was Judge Vernon Broderick. He indicated that Ryder's motion for compassionate release was viable and could have been granted at any time. However, despite continued urging from Ryder's lawyer and knowing of Ryder's rapidly deteriorating health, Broderick delayed his decision. And then when Ryder's family learned of his illness, they prepared for his possible release, only for their hopes to be dashed as the process just kept on dragging on. And then Broderick ultimately cited legal barriers to Ryder's release, noting that he was an old law criminal and eligible for release under the First Step Act of 2018, which applies to crimes committed from 1987, after 1987. So if you remember, I've talked about this ad nauseum. If you remember, we talked about the Gemini twins, how they got released, and they were convicted under those pre-1988 laws that are in place for sentencing guidelines. And so what we see here is Ryder, just like what we were talking about with Henry Borelli, that because of the sentence and because of how it was set up, that he wasn't eligible for a compassionate release. But by the time he made the ruling, so Judge Broderick made the ruling, Ryder died behind bars. And it's interesting, the judge actually said that Ryder deserved the chance to die with dignity. And Ryder's son, Michael, was very frustrated with the judicial delays. He was noting that the judges enacted it caused them to lose a lot of precious time with their father. And the family had been spending decades traveling around the country hoping for his release. And despite the judge's acknowledgement of the situation, Ryder passed away without the opportunity to say, even a final goodbye to his family. Just, to me, we continue to see these cases of compassionate release not being granted. We see just a lot of issues with how the criminal justice system is, how the punishment is administered, and we're just going to continue to have more and more aged prisoners out there. And something's got to be done about this. We're having an aging population and having an aging prison population. So, this is not going to go away. And it's just, to me, a shame that if someone's able to die at home, they're no longer a threat to society, and the family can pay for the medical care. Why is it us as taxpayers need to pay for that? But, that's my opinion. On a final note, I want to thank everybody for their kind words and comments on my last video where I discussed Tommy Reynolds being released. We had several friends and family members of Tommy in the comments, and I'm convinced that Tommy's going to have a good support system coming home. See, Tommy wants to be there for his family, especially his mother, Mary Ann, and Tommy's being given this new opportunity. I don't think he's going to screw it up. And I'm going to try and bring on Chad Marks to discuss this with us. I've had Chad on the show before, and he's a great guy. One of the best when it comes to helping people with getting compassionate release and navigating that process. And Chad was actually one of the very first people to get out on the First Step Act. He's done a lot of great work, and he's definitely got a passion for it. And also, maybe in a surprise move, I watched Robert Rosso of Convict Inc. last night. And, most of he's in prison for violating his supervised release. He was in prison for about 20 years. He was in there for dealing drugs. I think he got, there was like the 3 strikes rule or whatever. And so he actually had a life bid, and he ended up getting a compassionate release. He came out of prison, started his YouTube channel. He's doing very well at first. He had a new wife. He, grew that channel pretty big fast. He was kind of up there like with Chad Marks for a while, but he just couldn't beat that demon of drug addiction. He started going off track of his original mission of the channel, which was criminal justice reform. He started to have a beef with Jimmy Calandra and others. And with that said, he's going to be out, I believe, in January, maybe sooner. But the point is that he did a short YouTube show from prison, which he's been doing. He does that, I don't know how often, but, he at least once a week, a couple of times a week, he'll do a short show from prison. And it's just the audio. that's played. He's, obviously can't be on camera on it, but anyway, he did a short YouTube show from prison where he spoke about Tommy Reynolds. You see, Rosso and Tommy Reynolds were close, and Rosso's another one that said that Tommy Reynolds was remorseful for what he did to Judy Shimtoff. He denounced being in that life, and according to everyone I've talked to, Tommy Reynolds was a model prisoner. Tommy stayed true, never ratted, and like I said, he could have gotten out in 6 years if he had became an informant. But I thought it was a good video on Tommy Reynolds, and my conclusion on Tommy Reynolds is that I wish him the best. It doesn't take away the crimes that he was convicted of. We know that, but he paid a price. He stayed to his sentence. He didn't rat. He was stand-up guy, to the end of that sentence. And I know his mother's happy. His mother needs him, loves him. I hope Tommy can take this opportunity and make the best out of it. Like I said before, he's not going to deal with Jimmy Calandra. There's not going to be any issues. I don't think Tommy will even talk to Jimmy, and Jimmy's not going to talk to Tommy. And I doubt Tommy will even be here on YouTube or social media. I could be wrong. I don't think he's even thinking about any of that this time. He's just trying to get his life together. As it's always a huge transition when you enter the free world after all these years. Just imagine how things have changed with technology since he first got locked up. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please hit the like button. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't. I'd love to hear your comments. What's your opinion on Scott Burnstein putting together a list of the top rising stars in the mob? Do you think that's fantasy? Do you think it's a mistake for him putting these guys out there? I really want to know your thoughts, and we can have a great discussion in the comments below. Also, let me know what you think about what Judge Block said for his reasoning for denying Vic Amuso a compassionate release. Thanks for watching today's show. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and God bless you always.